The world of professional wrestling and entertainment was left stunned and heartbroken following the death of Hulk Hogan, the larger-than-life figure who transcended the squared circle to become a global icon of strength, charisma, and resilience. But as the details of his final days emerged, the reality behind the legend's decline was even more tragic than fans ever imagined. Known for his massive frame, thunderous voice, and unforgettable catchphrases like "What you gonna do when Hulkamania runs wild on you?" Hogan spent decades as the face of wrestling, inspiring millions with his larger-than-life persona. But behind the bandanas, bright yellow tights, and powerful poses was a man quietly fighting a losing battle with a body worn down by decades of brutal matches, unrelenting fame, and personal demons. In the months leading up to his death, those closest to Hogan, whose real name was Terry Bollea, began to notice a dramatic change in both his physical health and mental outlook. The once powerful wrestler who had slammed giants and survived steel cage wars was now barely able to walk without assistance, the result of over a dozen back surgeries, multiple knee replacements, and mounting nerve damage that left him in constant pain. Sources close to the family revealed that Hogan had become increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving his Florida home, and was often seen relying on walkers or wheelchairs to get around. Although he tried to maintain his signature optimism in public appearances, behind the scenes he struggled with intense depression, worsened by the physical limitations that robbed him of his independence. Compounding the pain were lingering financial disputes, a complicated family history, and regrets about broken relationships with fellow wrestlers and loved ones. In private conversations, Hogan reportedly spoke about feeling like his body had betrayed him and lamented not being able to leave the wrestling world on his own terms. Friends say he often watched old matches, sometimes with tears in his eyes, remembering the glory days when crowds would chant his name, unaware of the physical cost it all came with. But perhaps the most heartbreaking revelation was that, in his final days, Hogan knew the end was near. Despite efforts by his doctors to manage his deteriorating health, including a brief hospitalization for complications related to multiple organ strain, it became increasingly clear that his body was giving out. According to reports, his heart was enlarged, his lungs showed signs of long-term scarring, and his kidneys had begun to fail. In the final week, Hogan was surrounded by close friends and family members, including his children Brooke and Nick, who reportedly reconciled with him during a deeply emotional moment days before his passing. Former wrestling colleagues, many of whom had shared rivalries, feuds, and memories with Hogan, also reached out to say their goodbyes, with some describing the final conversations as healing, raw, and deeply emotional. At the very end, Hogan reportedly passed away peacefully, with his hand held by his daughter, as soft classic rock music played in the background, fitting for a man whose life was built on performance, passion, and power. As news of his death broke, tributes flooded social media, with fans, celebrities, and athletes all honoring the man who inspired generations to believe in courage, perseverance, and never giving up. But beyond the spotlight and the headlines, Hogan's tragic final days serve as a somber reminder of the toll that fame and physical sacrifice can take, even on someone who seemed indestructible. The shocking truth behind his death wasn't just in the medical records or the silence of his final moments. It was in the gradual erosion of a man who once stood as a titan, now remembered not only for his victories in the ring, but for the very human pain he endured when the crowd had stopped cheering. Hulkamania may be gone, but the legend and the lessons he leaves behind will never die.